Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Sarnia Cinema Podcast. In line with our new format, we're going to be taking a deeper look at a couple of films that have come out recently. The first film we'll take a look at is the Simon Pegg last in the Cornetto trilogy film The World's End, directed by Edgar Wright and also starring Nick Frost, etc., plus a whole load of he's in it sort of British faces. And then the second film is even more they're all in it, as my mum would say. It's Cloud Atlas, based on the very, very ridiculously popular book by David Mitchell, not that one. It spans the centuries and genders and time and race and all sorts to bring us a story of, well, we'll talk about that later. Anyway, so first film today is The World's End. As I said, this is the third part of the Cornetto trilogy following Shaun of the Dead and, of course, the quite lamentable Hot Fuzz, I think.
I love Hot Fuzz.
Yeah, you're wrong, though.
That's fine.
Okay, fine. Again, directed by the brilliant Edgar Wright. This film, according to IMDb, shows 5 friends who reunite in an attempt to top their epic pub crawl from 20 years earlier, unwittingly, and we are doing spoilers, becoming humankind's only hope for survival. So what did we think of this? Claire, do you want to start us off on this?
I'll start it off. Well, I really liked it. I'm kind of torn between really loving it and really mediocring it. I think it's because I loved Shaun of the Dead and I loved Hot Fuzz so much. My expectations went through the roof with this film because I thought they were going to bring out the big guns, so to speak. And I was, even though I laughed like the entire way through it, there was something that wasn't quite knocking it on the head for me, and I just thought a lot of it was reminiscing how recycling some of the previous jokes that we've seen in the series, which I think once again is really good because we all love them, and then we also want to see something a bit different. So for me, the whole fence thing where he just, spoiler alert, we just wouldn't stop jumping over fences, and I thought we've seen this so many times, do something different. And it's kind of, I don't know, I'm going to say I really, really liked it, but there are things that really annoyed me about the whole film. But generally, overall, fantastic film. And I loved it how it was so British. It was just celebration of the British village, like they did in Hot Fuzz. But I think going back to somewhere that you grew up in and seeing how it's changed, and this just took it, I think everyone can probably associate that with going back to a childhood place and thinking how different it is now. But generally loved it, but a few things that I'm quite annoyed at.
Yeah, okay, we'll delve into that in a minute or two. I mean, I've got to say, I thought the first sort of hour or so was cracking, absolutely cracking. And then there is a twist in which the town's populated by robots, which is fine, and they do a lot of fighting and stuff. But up until that point, I'd kind of forgotten that it was a sci-fi thing. I'd kind of forgotten that it was an apocalypse thing, and I was sat there thinking, is this someone doing a hangover honestly and well and still funny without being sort of too outrageous and mildly racist and so on and so forth? Because what I liked about it, to start with, is these guys were all perfectly nice idiots in their own way. I mean, Simon Pegg's character is perhaps the least likeable of them, and yet he's front and centre, and they don't try and make him... There's no effort during the film to make him seem like a better person or a misunderstood person. He's just somebody who didn't grow up, and he just sort of doesn't really go anywhere. I think that's maybe one of the problems with the second part of the film, is he doesn't cut on to what the other guys have cut onto. But the thing they did quite well with the characters was the other people played by Eddie Marsden, Paddy Considine, Tim from The Office, who I can never remember his name, and Nick Frost. Martin Freeman. They've all grown up, but in their own way, they're all quite sad as well. They've all got, I mean, the Paddy Considine character is constantly, he sort of mentions quite a few times he's going out with a 26-year-old gym instructor, and they've got their businesses that are sort of doing well, or they're still working for their dad, and so on and so forth. So they've got sort of the trappings of success, but none of them have really got it. I thought it was genuinely funny. I mean, I personally, they're recycling jokes, but I think Nick Frost saying "I cunt" is really funny. It always has been, and I like there's obviously an ease of sort of banter between the whole cast, which works really well. Russ, what did you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I mean, quite similar, to be honest with you, to you guys. I mean, I know I say anyone that read the review I put up on the Facebook page will kind of know where I'm going with it. But I think, like you said, one thing that's quite quite important is that, you know, they try this bit of kind of last act redemption with Simon Pegg's character, you know, with the fact that obviously he wasn't in Alcoholics Anonymous at the start. He was in some kind of, you know, I don't know what you'd call it, just some kind of therapy, wasn't it, really? Because he obviously cut himself, or, you know, something kind of gone on with that. And like you say, it was just a little bit too much. It wasn't based on anything. It had no backstory to it, and it was just kind of thrown in to make him all of a sudden likable. Because like I said, otherwise he is a bit of a Burke. You know, he's just this guy who's, come on, let's get the team back together and let's kind of go on this kind of pub crawl. Same as you, that I mean, I thought the first hour was great and really enjoyed it and laughed out loud. The whole cinema laughed out loud, but it just lost its way for me and just stopped being that funny for a start, and then it just kind of became a bit muddled with this alien presence that was trying to take over the world by putting these blank robots in place, but then saying, "Oh, you know what? I'll stuff it now. I'm not going to bother with that. I'm just going to mug off." And then that was a bit
and then odd ending, wasn't it?
And then we get this strange apocalyptic kind of end to it, which was so at odds with kind of what had gone before, and it was almost like that was kind of some nodding wink to some comic fanboy audience that had gone to see it. Oh, they'll really love this. You know, it's turned into some kind of apocalyptic fantasy where Simon Pegg's leading a band of these kind of robots. I didn't quite understand what they were doing either. You know, it's like you've suddenly got a band of these things that don't really think or feel or do anything, and they're supposed to now be fighting against. It was quite late, and I was a bit tired. But normally these films are hilariously brilliant and funny, and you know, Shaun of the Dead's got quite a moving ending, funnily enough, and Hot Fuzz is hilarious when James Bond ends up with a church spire up his nose, which is just hilarious. And so this one didn't quite match either of those for me. And I mean, I'm quite glad it's happened, because I'm now glad that Edgar Wright specifically can move on to other things. Because I think he's done. He needs to put this style away, and I think he's done it enough. I know I spoke to you, Winter, about, you know, the fast cuts and the close up of beer being poured, and that's all fine. But I think the problem with it was that the story was so narratively repetitive that then to add that repetitive nature of shots onto it as well just added that whole. It just got a bit tedious, really. And it's funny, like I said in the review, I find myself talking about it badly, but I enjoyed it. I just put, like I say, whereas the other two I've probably seen 10 times each. This one, definitely. I can't really imagine watching it again unless it's on Channel 4 on a Sunday evening.
Yeah, I think I said to you last night, it's probably the funniest film I'll never see again.
Yeah.
And it's an odd. I thought what it really lacked was when it turns out these things are robots. They should have been made of flesh. They should have been scarier. There should have been, because I mean,
just
there was
their
just
heads
no
off
peril,
like a Lego block,
and they should. I was kind of, you know, you kind of looked forward to that. Oh, this is going to get quite creepy now. This is going to get quite nasty, and they're still going to be bumbling through it.
Yeah.
As you know, as kind of, I suppose, sort of oblivious to it, and that will be the comedy. But no, it sort of wasn't, and it didn't. I just didn't think it went in. Sort of, it didn't go harsh enough on those bits. I mean, I did like. I quite like the fight scenes because they did have this kind of. Everyone can just fight really well, kind of knockabout nature to them. And I think that was quite, if they were going to go down this sort of more light-hearted route, I think that was a really good way of doing it. But I mean, I think the problem is Edgar Wright made Scott Pilgrim. Yeah. And he hasn't, and that's him left more or less to himself to make a film rather than with Pegg and Frost. And it's a much better film. And that style of direction works much better, I think, in Scott Pilgrim, where, it's got this quite humdrum story, but it attaches it to this quite fantastical sort of story and presentation on the other side. And I think Scott Pilgrim's one of the great sort of films of the last few years, to be honest.
It's funny, I watched it again the other week, funnily enough, now that you mention it. And yeah, I didn't love it as much as I remembered to.
Really?
Which is a bit strange. Because
it was on TV
quite
recently.
And that's kind of what happened. I watched it at the cinema, I really enjoyed it because I'd read the comic kind of beforehand and all that kind of stuff. And then I think the DVD was on special, like 5 for 30 a couple of years ago, Blu-ray or whatever. And I picked it up and just hadn't kind of watched it. The other night I thought, I'll sit down and watched it. And I enjoyed it. It was good, but in the same way, I think his style for me doesn't necessarily lend well to repeat viewings, because it's all about, wow, that was good, oh, that was clever, look what he's done there, and kind of all the bells and whistles that go, especially with that film, which is very much that, the P bar and the extra life. It's very kind of the moment. And so second viewing, it didn't necessarily work as well for me, but it's still great. I still do like it a lot. But I mean, things like Shaun of the Dead and the Hot Fuzz, I kind of watch a lot more. I mean, if he is doing Ant-Man next, which I don't know much about, but it'll be an interesting one because it's very strange from what I've heard.
It'll be interesting to see him very constrained.
Yeah.
By something much bigger than
him,
than he is.
Because everything else that he's done has pretty much been you can do what you like. You know, it's all good. You're the man. You're the right man for the job. You know, and no one would disagree with it. But I think there's a bit of stepping out of his comfort zone, which is great, and doing something a bit different.
I mean, with this film, though, I mean, it had that weird sort of Likely Lads thing to it. Going back to the old town, and of course everything completely sucks. And it did sort of make this attempt to do some kind of social commentary, like the pubs are the same and all. But I just kind of thought all of that stuff just he just kind of dragged it down a bit. And I could have, if it had been a 90-minute film about some blokes who go back to their old town and try and do this without all the alien stuff, I think I'd have absolutely loved it.
I think it definitely had that same thing that in Star Wars. I always compare this to Star Wars Episode 3, where he's like, join the dark side. No, join it. Oh, okay then. It's that kind of thing where it's the same thing that kind of happens, is that there isn't enough conflict, enough for something to actually have that, I'm really feeling this emotional peak here. And yeah, I'm kind of really disappointed that it didn't really, as Ross said, didn't really have much foundation to it, to anything to build up on. Just was kind of left as, and this is going to happen as well. I mean, things like Dusk Till Dawn, where they had that flip where that was done amazingly well.
Yeah,
so it was all of a sudden this is going to happen. But as I said before, we had such a big expectation of something was going to happen. You forgot about it and then remembered it again with this one. So it kind of lost your sense of thought, really.
Yeah, I mean, The World's End, I mean, I've got to admit, I did laugh most of the way through, and there were still some laughs at the end. And the screening I was in laughed a lot. It's one of the biggest sort of laughing audiences I've been with in quite some time.
Jump when everyone started laughing. I was like, oh yeah,
yeah.
Let's bear the people.
And there is a great gag at the end with a cornetto rapper.
Yeah,
but this is entirely the problem with the film. It should have ended there.
Yeah,
but they had to go, like you say,
there was something else going on.
Bizarre bit with Simon Pegg.
Yeah, asking for a glass of water, didn't he? I think.
Yeah.
If I recall
five
correctly.
glasses of water.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't understand it. Anyway, talking about not understanding films, we're now going to talk about The Cloud Atlas. Now, Claire, you saw this quite some time ago.
I saw it in November of last year.
So you're the only one who saw it on the big screen. Now, as I mentioned earlier, The Cloud Atlas, it's a story. It follows a story, well, more of like a theme of human endeavour in a weird way. And you've got a selection of actors who play all sorts of different roles across genders, across races, and they're all in different times. And it's a film that since watching it, I think every couple of days a bit has popped into my mind, and I've gone, yeah, and I've kind of understood it a bit more, I think. But what was it like seeing it on the big screen? Was it a bit too much seeing it sort of writ large?
Yeah, it was massive. I saw it on the IMAX as well, so it was like super huge, and I was sat quite near the front, and I was like, my eyes are gonna have to get adjusted to this for the first 10 minutes, because it's such an epic film, and there's so many. You have to remember so much going into one story to the next story, because you have to remember the relationships of the characters with everybody in order to make sense for the next one, because then you think, oh, that's that guy from the other thing. And so you have to think along with the film, and being there with an audience, you kind of got the reactions from other people. There were some people who were really into it, and there's some people you just saw shrugging through the entirety of the film, because they just didn't, it made them feel uncomfortable because there was so much information. And it's like that scene in Clockwork Orange when he's just sat there having to watch all the violent things. So I think some people wanted to leave because it was just too much for them to take, because it's just story after story after story being related, and then back and forth and back and forth. It's just, but I personally, from my point of view, I loved it, and I still remember it. I haven't seen it since, but I'm probably going to revisit it now after we've discussed it to see what you guys think, and see if I still feel the same way as I did about it before.
And Russ, you watched it last night.
I did.
What did you think of it?
Yeah, I still don't know. I enjoyed it.
Hmm.
I was worried because I didn't think I would. I kind of hadn't really seen much around it, but I'd read a bit around it and was kind of a little bit confused by the whole kind of concept and not quite sure kind of where to place it. And that's kind of part of it, isn't it? But I did enjoy it. I think that I read something that Mark Como said about it, and he said that kind of on second viewing he enjoyed it more. And you think he almost kind of enjoyed it more in a second viewing because he said he was buoyed up by the exuberance of its high vaulting ambition, and I kind of think that is part of it. Is that it's a staggering achievement. It's an independent film that cost $100 million, which is insane, and it's beautiful. It is a really good looking piece of cinema. Even the effects are pretty well polished. It looks pretty great. Some of the makeup isn't as good as it potentially could be, but you are turning men into women and not just keeping the same frame and all that kind of thing. Yeah, and different races, exactly. And some of them are flawless. I mean, Halle Berry is a young English or young American woman in kind of that. What's the first section when they're kind of in South Pacific kind of time? It's staggering. But I do think it needs that second viewing because I think part of my problem with it is me. It's not. I don't think there's anything wrong with the film. I think part of the problem with it was that I was kind of sat there, and I'm happy to sit there for kind of the first hour and not really know what's going on and kind of hope it's going to come to some form of conclusion. But I think I naturally assumed that it was all going to be totally interlinked and weave itself together to form one singular idea at the end, and it's not like that. In many ways, you are watching 6 separate narratives that just happen to cross paths and influence each other. And I think if I'd known that at the start, I wouldn't have been waiting for that thing, and I could have just sat back and enjoyed it, kind of, because some of the stories are really great. There's Jim Broadbent in kind of a bit of a crazy breakout of an old people's home.
That was very strange.
And it's really strange. And so I was kind of watching that really intensely, going, but how is this going to really link back in? And it does. It's got the link there with, I think it's Soon-Mi is watching kind of his, whatever he turns into a screenplay.
Played by Tom Hanks.
Yeah, exactly. So I it did happen, but and so I think that watching it again, I'd be unburdened by that. And then I could have potentially enjoyed it more. I mean, what I loved, where there is some great mirroring, in there of the different actors and their characters and kind of how they progress through. I know it talks kind of in the synopsis about how, there's a journey of one soul that starts off bad and kind of becomes good, and that's kind of Tom Hanks kind of moving through the film and his kind of differing characters and so on. But I thought Hugh Grant's just always the bad guy, which is a shame for Hugh Grant, but quite nice for Hugh Grant because it's nice to see him playing against
to the point
time.
where he sort of. He dies in very similar ways. He's constant. I mean, one of the things that struck me watching it was this constant return to cannibalism. It's sort of like from literal cannibalism to slave trade to there's a Soylent Green reference in there, and
to stealing work from someone else's imagination.
It's a really odd sort of theme. But I think what really struck me was I quite like the way a lot of the characters, like Hugh Grant's characters throughout the film, it's this idea that people will keep making the same mistakes. And Jim Sturgis' character is roughly the same person, but each time a little braver. Each time,
he's always trying. If he's not protecting a slave, he's trying to protect another woman. He's trying to start a rebellion.
And then even the sort of the Russ Abbott-esque kind of appearance he makes in the Scottish pub. He's doing the same thing, and like you've got this Tom Hanks' character who seems to be the only one who that character seems to learn and actually sort of progress. But I was just blown away by the whole thing. And I think it's a film to wallow in. It reminded me of something like Southland Tales.
Okay.
Which is... And the difference with Southland Tales is that film is a frigging mess. An absolute mess.
Yeah.
But it had that same kind of... Right, I'm going to have to... One... I'm going to have to work to watch this to get some benefit. And 2, I'm also going to have to just sit there and let it just sort of wash over you and go, okay. And like, I think you said something very similar about when we watched Dread a few months ago. And you said you'd like to watch it again just because you watched it with so much expectation.
Yeah.
you'd like to watch it.
You watch it unburdened
in the
of
knowledge, but it is a really good film.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think this,
Not having to decide whether you like a film is actually quite a big thing. You know, it's like you go in with expectations, and with Dread, it was one of the things like, oh, please don't cock it up,
just don't be
please
shit.
don't be shit. And so you're watching it, and you kind of, even in the first 10 minutes, you might have made your mind up and gone, I'm going to like this no matter what. We've all done it. You've decided you're going to like a film, and you walk in.
That's what I think a lot of people have done with World's End.
I think so as well, because you walk in there thinking,
definitely.
and it's much more difficult if you decide you're going to like something, and then it doesn't happen for you. It's much more difficult to kind of go, oh, I didn't really like it.
I've got to say, at like 9:15 on a Sunday night in the Mallard, there was when you kind of walked in, there was kind of an air of, this is it.
This is a good place to
there
be.
was an expectation lingering, and I think for a lot of people, it was probably that expectation was kind of fulfilled. But
and that's why Cloud Atlas is even tougher, because you could be 2 hours into this and still not sure how you feel about it, and you've still got another hour to go, you know. And it wasn't until that last kind of hour where it really picks up pace and everything's happening and it's really moving along. I was like, oh, okay, no, I'm quite happy to be taken along by this now. I mean, I would rather if Tom Hanks didn't have to refer to everything as the true. But that's that's
brilliant.
I imagine that's in the book. I don't know. I would imagine you wouldn't.
No, I don't read books.
But yeah, like I said, I did like it. It was good.
It is a funny film, because there is. I mean, I know I watched it with Katie, and she was very much kind of like, "Is this going somewhere? Is this going to get somewhere?" And then there was very much that kind of whole thing of, this nose Tom Hanks has got on, or what accent's that? And even though I mean I loved it, I think it's a brilliant film, but I've got to say, if I'd have watched it in a slightly different frame of mind, I think it could have really annoyed me, and then it would be a film I'd probably watch in a year's time and go, "Oh, why didn't I like this? This was great." But I can really imagine it kind of grating. And I knew you were saying it was independently produced. I didn't realise that.
It was, yeah. Well, you know,
staggering.
Yeah, the Wachowskis and Tom Twyker. I mean, I think the Wachowskis were the real driving force behind it. But yeah, they had to get all the money together, and they got 100 million together in the end, which is, like I say, a staggering amount of money. You know, the independent films, you're talking like 30 million, 40 million, you know, maximum. It's huge.
Because Dread did the same, of course,
did.
and that.
I mean, there's good.
And again, that was another film about very much kind of. They made a comic book film, but they made a comic book film actually in the spirit of the comic, and said, "Sorry, we're producing this because we want it to be for adults."
Yeah, that's one of those films that I can put on whenever.
That's
such
fantastic.
a great film.
But it's interesting you should mention this about the producing, because I was reading an article about about Vin Diesel, and I didn't realise he's got a new film coming out, Riddick.
Yep.
That's been independently produced as well, because he
has.
said the problem is they wanted an R rating.
Yeah. Yes.
And they had to. The only way they could do it was to make it themselves.
Yeah.
They've stripped it down, so he's no longer king of the universe
Dark
or whatever
One,
he ended
or
up
whatever
as.
it's called.
And I think this is the way it's going to go. I think we're going to see a lot more of these people saying there is a viable business proposition here, where if I put, say, 60 million into something like Judge Dredd, cinema, okay.
Yeah.
But the DVD sales will do it.
Yeah, we'll rock it.
And I think, I've got to say, I think it's going to lead to some very good film. Have we seen the trailer for a film called The Battery?
No.
I've got to recommend you check out a trailer for a film called The Battery. It's a hipster zombie movie. Is the best way I can describe it. That's my gotta watch that trailer for the week, because I saw it a couple of weeks ago. I think we posted it on the Sarnia cinema page a while ago. So glad you read it, guys. I
don't think you did post. I think you're lying.
But I'd probably recommend you check it out, because it's a zombie movie, very hipsterish.
Okay.
It looks really good.
That and the Hunger Games too.
Oh, when I saw the swimming.
The swimming.
I'm so excited. Claire, did you see the first Hunger Games film?
I did, yeah.
What did you think of it?
Well, I hadn't read the book. I know you guys have read the book, but I
hadn't read it when I saw the first film.
Okay, that's right. I really liked it. I loved just the layers of society and stuff. I mean, that stuff I'm really into.
It's going to get deeper than that. It's going to get deeper
I hope
for you.
so. That's because then that stuff is amazing. Is it not going to go deeper?
No, it will.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
It gets bigger.
It's hardcore.
Yeah.
Hardcore.
It gets much bigger.
People are just like coming into the room with this is on, and saying it's hardcore.
It's hardcore. It's going deeper.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Good times.
Is this when we say how excited we are about Pacific Rim?
Yes, Pacific Rim on Friday at the Mallard. That will be tomorrow. If you're listening to this today, which is now Thursday, it is out tomorrow at the Mallard.
And Wolverine is out
Wolverine's out as well
today.
Yep.
If you're listening
to Thursday,
to
yeah,
Thursday.
Today. So that'll be good.
Yeah.
So we'll catch both of them.
In 2 weeks' time,
Yep.
we'll definitely be doing Pacific Rim.
I'm just thinking I'm going away, but that's fine. Maybe in a week's time, you never know.
Yeah, and I think we might do Wolverine if we've all seen it, because we're just going to do this if we've all seen it. So thank you very much for listening to some more rambling film chat. Join us next time for Pacific Rim. Check out the film Lakeview Terrace for a terrible racist joke about Pacific Rim, but that's Neil LaBute for you. Anyway, see you next time, and don't forget to like us on Facebook. Cheers, bye.